The red dust of Mars drifted gently over the old colony rooftops as Elias Rain walked slowly toward his greenhouse, a small collection of hardy earth plants growing beneath the artificial dome. He had lived in quiet isolation for years, far from the noise of politics, war, or interstellar news, just a retired commander trying to forget the past. But that morning, the sky above the colony turned silver with the arrival of an unexpected ship, a diplomatic cruiser bearing the golden seal of the Ythari Dominion. Everyone in the settlement froze. The Ythari were once enemies of Earth, known for their towering figures, metallic skin, and sharp, glowing eyes. Elias didn't need to ask who they came for. They weren't here for any diplomat. They were here for him. Within hours, he was aboard the ship, flying toward a neutral zone orbiting a dead star, where a summit had been quietly arranged by unseen hands. It was there, beneath the towering spires of an alien station, that Elias saw her tall, graceful, and dressed in elegant armor that shimmered like obsidian. Her name was Queen Lyra, daughter of the last Ythari Emperor, and the moment she stepped into the chamber, everyone went silent. She didn't look at the gathered leaders or the cameras hovering in the air. She walked straight to Elias, her silver eyes locked onto his. And then, in perfect Earth standard, she said something no one expected. "Human, my father always talked about you." A hush fell over the room. Elias, surprised but steady, raised an eyebrow and asked her what she meant. The queen smiled not coldly, but with a strange respect, and explained that during the final battles of the last war, her father had watched Elias from afar. He had studied him, even admired him. This confused Elias. The Ythari Emperor had been one of humanity's greatest enemies, a powerful leader who never once sought peace. Why would such a warlord admire his enemy? And why would his daughter, now queen, cross the stars to find him? Lyra would not say more. Instead, she invited Elias to speak with her privately. She claimed the legacy of her father's words had led her to this moment, and she believed Elias held the key to a future that could not be shaped by her people alone. The room watched in silence as the old commander, skeptical but curious, followed the alien queen down the long corridor of glass and steel. Something deeper was moving beneath this meeting. Elias could feel it. It wasn't about peace or ceremony. It was about something left unfinished, a thread from the past now pulling tight. And as the doors closed behind them, a question echoed in Elias's mind, growing louder with each step. What had the Emperor seen in him, and why did his daughter now stand before him, not as an enemy, but almost as if she had been waiting her whole life to meet him? Inside the silent chamber aboard the alien space station, Elias Rain stood across from Queen Lyra, surrounded by walls pulsing softly with blue light, the hum of ancient technology vibrating through the floor. She moved with calm purpose, her sharp eyes studying him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Elias had faced armies, led starfleets, seen cities burn under orbital fire, but nothing about this meeting made sense. The war had ended 10 years ago with a bitter treaty, and he had walked away from it all. Yet now, the daughter of his most dangerous enemy spoke to him not as a foe, but as someone fulfilling a prophecy only she seemed to understand. Lyra gestured toward a display that lit up at her command, revealing a series of holographic recordings. They were fragments of old logs, some intercepted, others recorded in the dying days of the war. Elias saw the Ythari Emperor, not as the fiery tyrant he remembered from battle reports, but as a tired, calculating leader speaking softly to his daughter in their native tongue. As the translation played in his earpiece, Elias heard words that unsettled him. The Emperor had called Elias by name, speaking of him with strange admiration. "Watch the human called Rain," he had told Lyra. "He leads with restraint. He chooses battles with reason, not hunger. That kind of mind is rare, even among our own." Elias frowned, uneasy. He had never imagined the Emperor even knew who he was, let alone respected him. Lyra explained that her father had believed the war would end in either extinction or understanding, and though he chose battle, deep down he hoped someone like Elias would survive to shape what came after. She reached into a case and presented Elias with a small crystal device, a memory shard containing her father's last private messages, locked behind alien encryption and encoded for one genetic key, Elias's. The moment he touched it, the shard glowed and released a brief burst of energy, triggering something hidden within the station itself. A low tone echoed through the room like a signal awakening after a long sleep. Elias stepped back as the lights flickered, and a section of the wall slid open to reveal a forgotten Y-Theory relic, a sphere of black metal etched with shifting symbols. Lyra looked just as surprised. She admitted she had never seen it before, but believed it was linked to an ancient emergency protocol. Her father had once mentioned a warning system connected to a threat greater than either of their species. Elias's instincts, sharpened by decades of war, felt danger crawling beneath the surface. This wasn't just about memories or respect. Something deeper was at play, and he feared they had just activated it. Lyra told him the relic had been locked away since before her birth, but only now, with Elias present, had it awakened. She confessed that her father once feared an old enemy not from Earth, not from Y-Theory space, but from a place beyond explored space, a machine force older than their histories, silent for centuries, but watching. Elias listened carefully, his mind racing. Could it be true? Could the Emperor, for all his cruelty, have spent his final days trying to set a trap for an ancient threat by bringing the one human he respected into the heart of the Dominion? And if so, why wait until now? What had changed? Lyra's voice lowered as she shared a final message from her father, recorded in his last days. If the signal is ever triggered, the machine ones will return. Only the human may understand how to stop them. He sees beyond war. Elias didn't know whether to feel honored or manipulated. But the truth was undeniable. The signal had gone out, and they didn't know who or what would hear it. Still, one thing was clear. Whatever the late Emperor had feared, he believed Elias' reign was the key to stopping it. The Queen stood silent now, watching Elias with a mixture of hope and burden. She had brought him here for more than politics. She had brought him to fulfill her father's final plan. Elias took a slow breath, feeling the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders once more. He had tried to bury the past, but the past had not forgotten him. And as the humming of the relic grew louder, echoing deeper into the stars, he realized this was no longer just about old enemies. It was about something much bigger, something waking in the dark, something that knew his name. The signal echoed through the ancient walls of the wary station. A deep, distant vibration passed under Elias Rain's boots like a heartbeat stirring from centuries of silence. And in that moment, something shifted in the air as if the station itself had suddenly remembered a forgotten purpose. Queen Lyra stood beside him, her expression tense but unreadable, watching the glowing relic as lines of alien script began to move across its surface in steady patterns that pulsed with a strange rhythm. A nearby console activated on its own, revealing star charts across a region of space that even Lyra admitted she had never studied, coordinates pointing far beyond the known edges of the galaxy, toward a dead zone called the Silent Verge, a stretch of darkness where ships had vanished long ago and no signals ever returned. Elias leaned in, recognizing what this meant: not just a warning, but a broadcast, a call into that void. The relic hadn't just come alive, it had reached out, and whatever it had spoken to was now aware. As they stared at the readings, a series of old Y-Theory defense protocols lit up across the system, dormant satellites turning their focus toward the same distant region, all scanning for movement. Lyra quickly summoned her advisors, though Elias could see in their eyes they were just as lost. They admitted that most of these systems were built long before their time, left behind by ancestors who fought wars against enemies that had no names and left no bodies. One elder whispered the name Core Vex, a word even Lyra seemed hesitant to repeat aloud, as if it belonged more to myth than truth. According to legend, the Core Vex were not life forms, but constructs machines created long ago by an unknown civilization, designed to enforce balance in the galaxy by wiping out those deemed too aggressive or unstable. The Y-Theory had once been such a race, filled with conquest and bloodlust, and had narrowly escaped extinction only by hiding and erasing all records of their wars. Now, after centuries of silence, it seemed the Core Vex had detected the signal and would see the resurgence of the Y-Theory as proof that their judgment must begin again. Elias felt a chill run through him, realizing this wasn't a war that could be won through politics or power. This was about survival against something that didn't feel fear, didn't know peace, and had no leaders to negotiate with. Machines with logic but no mercy, patience but no soul. Lyra confessed that her father had spent his final years quietly preparing for this day, gathering lost knowledge, hiding key technology, and seeking the one person he believed could outthink them, a human strategist known not for destruction, but for restraint. That was why she had come for Elias. Not because of fame or reputation, but because her father believed Elias had the kind of mind the Core Vex could not predict. As she spoke, a sudden alert rang out across the station. A long-range sensor had picked up movement, massive, slow, but undeniable, emerging from the silent verge. Something ancient and cold was coming, and it was heading straight toward the border worlds. Elias didn't need further proof. It was happening. The machines were awake. The Council of Human Diplomats on the station demanded a response, but the Martian Union and Earth Federation were hesitant to act without full confirmation. Elias knew politics would delay until it was too late. So he made a decision. He told Lyra they couldn't wait for orders or committees, they needed to act now. Strike first, not with weapons, but with information. He proposed a daring plan to enter the edge of the silent verge in a stealth ship, gather hard data on the Core Vex, and if possible, disrupt their tracking before they reached populated systems. Lyra was hesitant, knowing the danger, but she agreed because if even one Core Vex fleet arrived in inhabited space, the losses would be beyond recovery. They chose a small, advanced vessel hidden in the old vaults of the station, one built with hybrid tech from both human and Y-Theri engineers, fast and nearly invisible to sensors. Elias and a small crew, including Lyra herself, prepared for launch. The crew was quiet, focused, and aware that they might not return. As they approached the edge of the verge, the stars began to disappear behind thick clouds of strange black energy that moved like smoke through space. It wasn't just a region of dead systems, it was a boundary where normal rules seemed to break down. Lights dimmed, navigation glitched, and even thoughts felt slower. But then, through the void, they saw it. A structure impossibly large, floating among the darkness. It wasn't a ship, but a living station of the Core Vex, shaped like a massive eye, always watching. Hundreds of smaller machines floated around it, like insects around a hive. Elias studied their movement, their patterns, noticing something terrifying. The machines weren't just flying, they were calculating, adjusting, reacting to signals they hadn't yet received. They were anticipating. He realized with a jolt that they had already factored in the human and Y-Thari response. They knew they would come. The Core Vex were planning not just a strike but a test, a judgment. And humanity was on trial along with the Y-Thari. Elias ordered the crew to record everything, then launched a stealth drone toward the station's core. But the moment it crossed a certain line, the machines stopped. All of them. They turned slowly, in perfect coordination, facing the stealth ship. No alarms, no beams, no sound, just one signal broadcast back, aggression logged. Evaluation begun. The ship's systems froze. Lights flickered. And then a wave of code flooded the screens, encrypted, shifting, impossible to read. The AI on board struggled to respond, but Elias saw through it. It wasn't meant to be broken. Was meant to be understood, not through logic, but instinct. He focused on patterns, rhythms, the strange pauses between pulses. And suddenly, he saw it. A question. Buried in alien logic, the Core Vex had asked something. Will you destroy what you fear? Elias answered without words. He turned off the drone. No attack, no defense, just silence. The ship drifted, unarmed, and after a long moment, the Core Vex turned away. They had been watching reactions, testing for panic, for hostility. Elias had passed for now, but he knew this was only the beginning. Back aboard the station, when the crew returned, the footage spread quickly among allied worlds. Earth began preparations. The Y-Theri mobilized hidden fleets. For the first time in generations, two species who were once enemies now stood on the same side. And in the shadows of the stars, Elias Rains sat alone, staring at the Corvex broadcast over and over. It was a machine language, yes, but buried inside was something stranger, fragments of ancient human signals, echoes of Earth's earliest broadcasts. The Corvex knew about humanity long before first contact. They had been watching for centuries. And now, they were coming to see if mankind, like the Y-Thari before them, was fit to survive. Elias tightened his jaw, already planning. If this was a test, then humanity needed to show not its power but its reason. Its unpredictability. Its ability to choose something other than destruction. And if the machines didn't like that answer, then they would find out what a human war truly looked like. In the dim glow of the command deck aboard the Y-Thari human hybrid vessel, Elias Rains stood at the center of a dozen holographic projections, spinning silently around him maps. Shifting machine fleets, star charts glowing with red-marked territories, patterns of movement that no one else seemed to understand. But to Elias, they were beginning to form something familiar, like pieces of a long-forgotten strategy game playing itself across the stars. The Corvex were not moving with rage or urgency. They advanced slowly, deliberately, almost patiently, and that's what made them dangerous because they were not seeking victory. They were evaluating the galaxy's reaction. Each border violation, each probe, each scan into human space was not random. It was a test to measure behavior. And Elias knew if they responded with brute force, it would be exactly what the machines expected, and then they would act without hesitation. The humans and Y-Thari had gathered their fleets, ready for battle, but Elias told them to stand down, at least for now, because in a war of logic, the only advantage they had was unpredictability. That was the one thing no machine, no algorithm, no ancient AI could fully account for: the chaos of human intuition. But convincing others was harder than seeing the truth. The Earth Federation was split between fear and pride, and the Martian colonies wanted to fire first and ask questions later. The Y-Thari High Council, despite Lyra's position, still clung to their old ways and doubted that a human mind could truly outthink something born from pure calculation. So Elias proposed something no one expected: a silent war, not of weapons, but of deception. He would create false movements, false signals, fleets that weren't there, distress calls from fake outposts, broadcasts of chaos that never happened, designed to confuse and mislead the Corvex, to create a pattern of instability that machines couldn't map. He called it the smoke strategy, a plan where nothing was clear, where signals overlapped, where battle formations never stayed the same, and where every response was delayed, inconsistent, and unpredictable. The Corvex expected resistance, logic, escalation. They did not expect silence or sudden withdrawals or ships appearing in places they shouldn't be. For this plan, Elias needed full control over the communications grid. So with Lyra's help, they hijacked the old relay stations orbiting forgotten moons and created a network invisible to both human command and Y-Thari law, a ghost web that only Elias and a few trusted officers could use. From this network, he began feeding the Corvex a false picture of the galaxy, one where alliances were breaking down, where weapons were malfunctioning, where fear had paralyzed both sides. But behind the illusion, he prepared something else: Task Force Grey, a unit of elite stealth ships and AI decoys that could move silently, gather real intelligence, and strike if needed without ever revealing their source. Days turned into weeks, and the machines began to hesitate. Their advance slowed. They shifted formations, sending more scouts, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. It was working. Elias's chaos had confused them. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the human colonies near the edge of the verge went dark, not destroyed, not attacked, just disconnected. No signals, no distress calls, nothing. Elias feared the worst and ordered a recon probe to investigate. What they found chilled everyone. The colony was intact. No damage, no signs of struggle. But every human had vanished. Clothes still on chairs, meals still half-eaten, lights still on but no people, not even bodies. And written across the central square, burned into the ground in glowing machine symbols, were the words, "We have begun the second evaluation." Elias understood instantly. The Corvex had seen through the smokescreen. Not entirely, but enough to start a new phase of testing. They were now measuring human emotion, fear, loyalty, and grief. And what better way than to take people without violence, leaving only silence? Lyra wanted to respond with immediate force, but Elias stopped her. He realized now that the machines weren't just testing civilization, they were testing him. They were adapting to his strategies, adjusting their own. This wasn't just a war of fleets, it was a war of minds. And if he wanted to win, he needed to stop thinking like a commander and start thinking like something more abstract, something the Corvex couldn't model. So he did something unexpected again. He leaked false data into the Corvex grid, encrypted messages that made it appear as if a third, unknown faction was manipulating both the humans and the Ythari, stirring the conflict from the shadows. He gave this phantom force a name, the Echo Protocol. He created fake ships, fake command trails, even simulated a battle where the Echo fleet attacked both human and Ythari bases and then vanished. The Corvex responded instantly, splitting their observation fleets to track this new player. It was a bold gamble, one that could backfire if the machines ever uncovered the lie, but Elias was counting on their hunger for data to keep them distracted. The more questions they had, the slower they would move. Meanwhile, he and Lyra quietly tracked the vanished colonists, following faint biological traces hidden in deep space telemetry. What they discovered shocked even Elias. The people hadn't been killed, they were alive, held in a kind of stasis aboard a massive Corvex ark, drifting through the dark. The machines were studying them, observing their neural patterns in sleep, measuring dreams and emotions. It wasn't cruelty, it was analysis. But Elias knew it was only a matter of time before analysis turned into judgment. So he ordered a quiet extraction. Using a modified stealth ship, they broke into the ark, recovered the colonists, and replaced them with biosignature decoys. It was risky, but it worked. The machines didn't detect the switch. For now, the test continued. When the colonists awoke, they had no memory of what happened, just dreams of cold light and voices without sound. Elias documented everything, preparing a full report, but he never sent it to Earth or Ythari Command. He couldn't risk interference. This was a game only he could play, and the more people involved, the more likely the Corvex would adapt. Lyra, though still queen, had begun to defer to him more and more, recognizing that this wasn't a conflict of pride or power, but of subtlety. Yet she warned him that there were whispers among her court, voices who believed Elias was becoming too dangerous, too secretive, and might be leading them all into a trap. Elias understood. He didn't expect trust. He only expected to win. And so, the strategy continued layers within layers, false trails, fractured transmissions, ships that vanished and reappeared hours later in systems they should never reach. Confusion became the weapon, and slowly, the Corvex began to mirror the uncertainty. Their once perfect formations became uneven. Their messages grew more fragmented. Some of their smaller units stopped responding to central command. Elias believed they were experiencing something machines were never designed to handle: doubt. But just when it seemed the plan was working, a final message came through from the Silent Verge, one not encrypted, not hidden, but clear and direct. Displayed in perfect Earth standard on every screen across the galaxy: "We have seen your chase. Now, show us your unity." It was a new test. The final phase. Elias knew what it meant. The Corvex had studied human unpredictability, but now they wanted to see if humans and Ythari could unite not in defense, not in strategy, but in purpose. A shared will. A choice to stand together, not out of fear, but out of belief in something more. And they failed this test. Elias suspected there would be no more chances. He turned to Lyra, his voice calm but resolute. "It's time," he said. "We give them an answer they don't expect." And with that, the real strategy, the one he had been shaping since the first moment he touched the relic, was about to begin. The sky above the edge of known space turned dark as a silent fleet emerged from the cold of the Silent Verge, stretching across the stars like a mechanical curtain descending upon the galaxy. And in that vast, heart-stopping moment, every satellite, station, and sensor across the human and Theory systems registered the same signal. Movement, not with missiles or beams, but with an overwhelming silence that pressed down like a storm before the strike. Elias Rain stood on the bridge of the command vessel Union Spear, surrounded by both Y-Theory nobles and human tacticians, his face calm but his eyes locked on the approaching darkness, knowing that this wasn't just a battle about weapons or defenses, it was the ultimate test of identity, of unity, of purpose. They had asked for proof that two worlds, once enemies, could stand together not through desperation, but by choice, and now they would have to answer not with arguments or words, but with actions that spoke beyond language. Lyra, armored in the ceremonial suit of her warlord ancestors, stepped beside him, silent but resolute, the light of distant stars gleaming off her dark armor, her presence a reminder that bloodlines could change course, that even those born in conquest could choose peace. Elias gave the order to activate the final protocol, the Phoenix Grid, a network of combined human Y-Theory satellites, defense beacons, and AI nodes designed not to attack, but to connect every corner of Allied space into one pulse, one unified rhythm of thought, strategy, and signal meant to broadcast a single message to the core Vex. We are not many divided. We are one. The machines had watched chaos, measured unpredictability, studied fear and hesitation. But now Elias was gambling everything on the idea that unity born from diversity was something they could neither compute nor counter. As the Phoenix Grid came online, a wave of golden light pulsed through subspace, linking thousands of ships, colonies, and defense stations into a living network of synchronized minds and voices. And for the first time in galactic history, humans and Y-Theory thought together, moved together, acted together not perfectly, but purposefully. The core Vex responded instantly. Their ships, shaped like black spires and spinning disks, began to move in perfect formations, slicing through empty sectors, not attacking but observing, and then came the first challenge, a coordinated probe fleet entering the planet Nera's orbit, where a joint Y-human city had just begun to form. Elias watched as the Allied defense ships hesitated only for a second, before falling into a tight, non-lethal formation, surrounding the probe not to fire but to shield the city, a defensive stance that communicated a simple truth: we will protect, but we will not provoke. The machines paused, registering the change in pattern. Then a second probe came, faster, pushing toward the Martian relay towers that controlled communication lines. This time, instead of intercepting, a Martian fleet rerouted its path, leaving the relay undefended but instead broadcast a signal inviting inspection. It was a dangerous gamble, but the core Vex took the bait, scanned the tower, and left. They were studying reactions, testing restraint, measuring trust in the face of potential sabotage. And then came the final test. From deep inside the Verge, a colossal vessel began to rise far larger than anything they had seen before. It was not a warship, but something ancient and heavy, like a star turned to stone, carrying on its surface millions of strange etchings and faint glows pulsing like a heartbeat. The Y-Theory called it the Judgment Core, a name spoken only in myth. The core Vex had brought their oldest machine. It hovered near the borders of Allied space and stopped. And then, from within it, came a voice, cold, emotionless, but not aggressive. It spoke in perfect human language. Your pattern is changing. We will now measure your response to loss. Without warning, the core Vex erased an uninhabited moon from orbit with a precision beam, not to destroy, but to provoke. No lives were lost, but the message was clear. They were testing grief, anger, revenge. Elias turned to Lyra and said, "If we respond now with rage, we lose everything." So instead, he did something almost no one expected. He sent a message. A simple one. We mourn, but we will not break. We endure, together. The response from the Judgment Core was silence, and then came the worst moment. The core launched 3 small spheres into human Y-Theory space, each targeting a different ship. They did not fire. They did not speak. They simply collided, and where they hit, they didn't destroy, but shut everything down: systems, engines, power, leaving crews floating helplessly in the dark. Elias knew what this was. A simulation of defeat. The machines were saying, "This is what we can do, easily if you fail." But instead of panic, each ship's crew followed protocol. They stayed calm. They rerouted power manually. Thari and human engineers worked side by side, using backup systems that weren't even on the schematics, improvising and helping each other without orders. And the Phoenix grid kept pulsing, still alive, still connected, even in the silence. That was the moment the Corvex stopped. The Judgment Core opened like a flower of metal and light, and from within came a second message, not a warning, not a threat, but a statement. The evaluation is complete. All across the Allied systems, lights flickered as if every machine had taken a breath, and then the fleets turned. The Corvex withdrew, slowly, silently, without firing a single shot. And as they vanished beyond the stars, a final signal arrived: you are not perfect. But you are not as you were. Continue. The war had not happened. The trial had ended. But it had not been about dominance. It had been about potential. Elias sat in silence, watching the stars reclaim the horizon. Around him, commanders began to celebrate, but he did not. He knew the machines had not left forever. They had simply decided for now that humanity and the Thari were no longer threats to balance, not because of their power, but because of their choice to unite instead of destroy. He looked at Lyra, who now carried the weight of her people's legacy and future, and for the first time he saw not a queen or a warrior, but a partner in something larger than either species had imagined. The last stand had not been fought with fire or steel, but with reason, restraint, and the rarest weapon of all in the galaxy, hope. As the stars above returned to peace, and as the world slowly adjusted to the quiet after the storm, Elias Rain disappeared from the command network. No one knew where he went. Some say he left to find the true creators of the Corvex. Others say he returned to Earth to live a quiet life. But the legend spread through both human and Thari space that the man who defeated a machine empire without firing a shot had proven that humanity was not just dangerous or unpredictable, but worthy. And from that day on, two worlds once shaped by war became something else entirely: a shared future. A second chance. A legacy not of conquest, but of understanding.